Diego Santos had been fixing things for 32 years. Ever since his father taught him that everything broken could be made whole again if you understood how it worked and weren't afraid to get your hands dirty. In 3 decades of mechanical work, from earth mining equipment to asteroid belt harvesters to deep space, cargo haulers, Diego had never met a machine he couldn't repair. Until today. The Quantum Dreamer has been in our shipyard for 8 months. Chief Engineer Corvin Ironscale explained as they approached the massive vessel dominating Repair Bay 7 of Nexus Station's primary shipyard. The Kethanese naturally logical demeanor was strained with what Diego recognized as professional frustration. 17 different engineering teams have attempted repairs. All have failed. Diego looked up at the Quantum Dreamer and whistled low. The ship was beautiful in the way that only Andromedian vessels could be, organic curves that seemed to flow like water frozen in space, surfaces that shifted between metallic and crystalline depending on the viewing angle, proportions that suggested the ship had been grown rather than built. It was also clearly dying. The organic surfaces that should have pulsed with bioluminescent life patterns were dark and cracked. What should have been graceful curves were twisted into shapes that looked almost painful. The ship's living metal hull, designed to self-repair minor damage, was covered with spreading patches of what looked like metallic cancer. What happened to her? Dimensional storm in the Andromeda Transit Corridor, Engineer Ironscale replied. The ship was caught in a fold space anomaly that subjected her to gravitational forces that shouldn't exist in normal spacetime. By the Yavoi, time rescue ships reached her. The quantum resonance systems had been disrupted. Diego walked around the ship's base, noting the way the hull seemed to ripple with barely contained energy discharges. What kind of disrupted? The ship's biomechanical systems are no longer synchronized with her quantum core. The living metal is rejecting the quantum field emissions, which is causing the field generators to fluctuate, which further destabilizes the biomechanical integration. It's a cascade failure that gets worse every time we attempt to repair individual components. Diego had worked on enough hybrid biomechanical systems to understand the basic problem. Like trying to repair a patient who was simultaneously suffering from multiple organ failures. Fixing one system put additional stress on the others. What approaches have the other engineering teams tried? Engineer Ironscale pulled up a holographic display showing 8 months of failed repair attempts. Quantum field realignment, biomechanical system reconstruction, complete core replacement, staged component repair sequences, temporal stabilization protocols, dimensional field harmonics adjustment, exotic matter injection, and full system reboot. Diego studied the technical reports, noting the increasing desperation of the approaches. Let me guess, each repair attempt worked temporarily, then failed when the ship's systems started interacting again. Exactly. We can stabilize individual components, but we cannot restore the integration between the biomechanical and quantum systems the ship appears to be. Engineer Ironscale paused, his logical nature clearly struggling with the concept he was about to express. The ship appears to be in pain, and that pain is preventing her systems from accepting repair. Diego looked up at the Quantum Dreamer again, this time focusing not on the technical damage, but on the overall impression the ship conveyed. There was something almost tragic about her appearance, like a living creature that had been hurt so badly it couldn't trust anyone trying to help. Engineer Ironscale, can I ask you something that might sound crazy? Of course. Have any of the repair teams tried talking to her? Engineer Ironscale's expression shifted to what Diego was learning indicated complete confusion in Cathani. Talking to the ship? Andromedian vessels are partially alive, right? Biomechanical hybrids with quantum consciousness matrices? So if the Quantum Dreamer is in pain, maybe the problem isn't just technical. Maybe it's psychological. Mr. Santos, with respect, you are suggesting that we approach engineering repair as if it were medical treatment for a traumatized patient. Diego looked at the ship's darkened surfaces and twisted hull configurations. Engineer, I'm suggesting that maybe that's exactly what this is. Engineer Ironscale was quiet for a long moment, processing Diego's suggestion with the kind of thorough analysis that characterized his species. Such an approach would be ... unprecedented. Andromedian biomechanical systems do possess rudimentary consciousness, but they are not typically considered capable of psychological trauma. Maybe that's because nobody's ever tried to heal the psychology along with the mechanics. Diego walked closer to the ship's hull, placing his hand against one of the twisted metal sections. The surface was warmer than it should have been, and he could feel a subtle vibration that might have been a heartbeat. She's scared, Diego said quietly. Mr. Santos? The ship. She's scared of being hurt again. That's why she's rejecting repair attempts. Her consciousness is protecting itself from further trauma by refusing to integrate repaired systems. Diego had seen similar responses in mining equipment that had been damaged by accidents or poor maintenance. Not consciousness in the way sentient beings experienced it, but a kind of learned protective behavior that could interfere with normal operations. But he'd never dealt with it in a system as complex as an Andromedian biomechanical vessel. Engineer Ironscale, I'd like to try a different approach, but I'll need access to the ship's consciousness interface and permission to work outside standard repair protocols. What kind of different approach? Diego kept his hand on the ship's hull, feeling the subtle rhythms of damaged systems trying to maintain basic functions. I want to treat her like a patient instead of a machine. Build trust before attempting major repairs. Show her that we're trying to help, not cause more damage. Mr. Santos, even if such an approach were theoretically valid, the Quantum Dreamer's consciousness matrix is Andromedian technology. The interface protocols require specific neural compatibility. Engineer, I've been working with biomechanical systems for 15 years. I may not have Andromedian neural architecture, but I understand how damaged machinery behaves when it's been hurt badly enough to develop protective responses. Diego looked up at Engineer Ironscale. What's the worst that could happen if I try? My approach? The ship could reject the interaction attempt and accelerate her own system failures. And what happens if we don't try anything new? Engineer Ironscale's expression grew somber. The cascade failures will eventually result in complete system collapse. The Quantum Dreamer will become unsalvageable within the next 72 hours. Diego nodded. So we try something unprecedented, or we watch her die slowly. Those are the options. That appears to be an accurate assessment. Then let's try talking to her. The consciousness interface chamber was located deep within the Quantum Dreamer's core, accessible only through maintenance shafts that required Diego to crawl through spaces barely large enough for human proportions. Engineer Ironscale had to remain outside, monitoring Diego's progress through external sensors and providing guidance through comlink. Mr. Santos, you should be reaching the consciousness chamber in approximately 20 meters. Be aware that the biomechanical responses may be unpredictable. The ship's protective systems may interpret your presence as a threat. Diego squeezed through a section of damaged conduit, noting how the ship's living metal seemed to pulse and shift around him. Not aggressively, but with the kind of wary attention he associated with injured animals, unsure whether an approaching human meant help or harm. I can feel her watching me, Diego reported. The biomechanical systems are definitely aware of my presence. Are you experiencing any hostile responses? Diego paused, assessing his situation. The ship could easily crush him if she chose to. The living metal conduits could contract. The atmospheric systems could be cut off, or the artificial gravity could be manipulated to make movement impossible. But none of that was happening. Not hostile. more like curious and careful. The consciousness chamber, when Diego finally reached it, was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Instead of the mechanical control interfaces he was used to, the room was filled with what looked like a cross between a garden and a computer core. Organic crystalline structures grew from living metal surfaces, pulsing with soft bioluminescence that seemed to respond to his presence. "Mr. Santos," Engineer Ironscale's voice came through the CUM system. "You should see a central consciousness, node approximately 2 meters ahead of your position. That is the primary interface point for communication with the ship's awareness matrix." Diego approached the node, a crystalline formation about the size of his torso that pulsed with irregular light patterns. Up close, he could see that the crystal was damaged, with dark fractures running through its structure like old scars. "She's hurt," Diego said quietly. "The consciousness matrix itself is damaged, not just the mechanical systems. That should not be possible." Andromedian consciousness matrices are designed to be isolated from physical damage to prevent exactly that kind of trauma. Maybe the dimensional storm was strong enough to breach the isolation. Diego reached out carefully and placed his hand on the consciousness node. The response was immediate, and overwhelming dot images flooded Diego's mind, not his own memories, but the ship's experiences. The peaceful routine of interstellar travel, the sudden terror of being caught in forces that defied physics, the agony of having quantum consciousness torn apart by dimensional stress. And underneath it all, a desperate need for help, coupled with profound fear of being hurt again. Diego jerked his hand back, breathing hard. "Jesus, she's not just scared, she's traumatized. The dimensional storm didn't just damage her systems. It hurt her consciousness in ways that Andromedian designers never anticipated." "Mr. Santos, are you saying the ship is suffering from psychological trauma?" "I'm saying she's suffering from the quantum consciousness equivalent of PTSD. Every time someone tries to repair her systems, she experiences it as a potential threat and protects herself by rejecting the repair attempt." Diego looked around the consciousness chamber, noting how the bioluminescent patterns seemed to pulse in rhythm with damaged ship systems. The quantum dreamer wasn't just a machine with broken parts, she was a traumatized being who had learned that trusting others led to pain. "Engineer Ironscale, I need to know everything about Andromedian consciousness matrices. Not just the technical specifications, but how they process experiences, form memories, and develop protective responses." "Mr. Santos, that information is classified at levels far above my security clearance. Then we need to get someone here who has the right clearance. Because I can fix her mechanical systems, but not if her consciousness keeps fighting the repairs." Diego spent the next 2 hours in the consciousness chamber, not attempting any repairs, but simply maintaining gentle contact with the consciousness node and projecting what he hoped were reassuring intentions. It was unlike anything he'd ever attempted. Part mechanical diagnosis, part psychological counseling for a quantum intelligence that experienced reality in ways no human could fully understand. But gradually, the ship's responses began to change. The wary pulse of her bioluminescent systems became less erratic. The living metal surfaces stopped their constant subtle movements and settled into more relaxed configurations. Most importantly, the consciousness node's light patterns shifted. From the harsh, protective flashes Diego had first observed to softer, more curious pulses. "She's starting to trust me," Diego reported. "Not completely, but enough to let me examine the damage without triggering defensive responses." "Mr. Santos, this is unprecedented. No non-Andromedian has ever established consciousness interface with a biomechanical vessel. Maybe that's because nobody ever tried treating the ship like a patient instead of a machine." Diego was preparing for a more detailed consciousness assessment when his CUM unit chimed with an incoming high-priority message. "Mr. Santos, This is Admiral Luna Nightsong of the Andromedian Deep Space Fleet. I understand you have made contact with the Quantum Dreamer's consciousness matrix. Diego felt his blood pressure spike. Admiral, yes, ma'am. I've been attempting to assess the psychological component of her system failures. Mr. Santos, the Quantum Dreamer is not just any biomechanical vessel. She is a prototype consciousness integration system representing 15 years of advanced Andromedian research. Her consciousness matrix contains classified information critical to Imperial security. Diego looked at the damaged consciousness node, understanding for the first time why so much effort had been expended on repair attempts. Admiral, I'm just trying to help her heal from trauma that's preventing normal system function. And we appreciate your efforts, Mr. Santos. But I must inform you that if the Quantum Dreamer cannot be restored to functional status within the next 48 hours, Imperial protocol requires that her consciousness matrix be terminated to prevent security breaches. The communication ended, leaving Diego alone in the consciousness chamber with a traumatized ship who was now facing execution if she couldn't overcome psychological damage that no one had known was possible. Diego placed his hand back on the consciousness node, feeling the ship's awareness focus on him with desperate intensity. Don't worry, girl, he said quietly. I'm not going to let them give up on you. We're going to figure this out together. A consciousness node pulsed with what Diego chose to interpret as hope. Over the next 12 hours, Diego established the strangest working relationship of his career. The Quantum Dreamer's consciousness was unlike anything he'd encountered. Not human-like intelligence, but definitely aware, definitely capable of learning and memory, and emotional responses. And definitely traumatized in ways that were interfering with her ability to function. A dimensional storm wasn't just physical damage, Diego explained to Engineer Ironscale as they reviewed the consciousness assessment data. For a quantum consciousness matrix, being caught in fold space anomalies would be like having your thoughts scattered across multiple dimensions simultaneously. She experienced her own consciousness being torn apart and reassembled incorrectly. That would explain the integration failures, Engineer Ironscale mused. If her consciousness no longer trusts the connection between her awareness and her physical systems, she would instinctively resist any attempt to modify those systems. Diego nodded. She's protecting herself the only way she knows how, by maintaining control over her own systems and rejecting outside intervention. But that same protective response is preventing the repairs she needs to heal. A logical but counterproductive survival strategy. Exactly. So we need to convince her that repair attempts are safe, not threatening. We need to build trust before we can build new systems. Diego had spent hours in mental contact with the Quantum Dreamer, learning to communicate through the consciousness interface in ways the Andromedian designers had never anticipated. It wasn't telepathy. Humans lacked the neural architecture for true consciousness interface, but it was a form of empathic projection that allowed Diego to share intentions and emotions. What he'd discovered was that the ship's consciousness was remarkably sophisticated. She had preferences, curiosities, and what could only be called personality traits. She was also desperately lonely, having been isolated for 8 months, while teams of engineers treated her like a complex machine rather than a traumatized being. Mr. Santos, Engineer Ironscale said carefully, Admiral Nightsong has been monitoring your progress. She is skeptical that psychological treatment will produce the technical results required for the ship to return to service. What kind of results is she looking for? Full restoration of quantum field integration, biomechanical system synchronization, and dimensional navigation capability. Essentially, the ship must be returned to her original specifications within the next 36 hours, or they terminate her consciousness to prevent security risks. Yes. Diego rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of responsibility. He was being asked to cure psychological trauma that no one had known was possible, while simultaneously performing repairs that 17 expert teams had failed to complete. Engineer, I need to try something that's going to sound insane. At this point, Mr. Santos, insane may be our most logical option. I want to let the quantum dreamer participate in her own repairs. Engineer Ironscale's expression shifted to what Diego was learning indicated complete bewilderment in Gethani. Participate how? Instead of forcing repairs on systems that she's protecting, I want to work with her consciousness to identify which repairs she's ready to accept and which ones feel threatening. Let her control the pace and sequence of the restoration. Mr. Santos, that would require the ship to understand complex engineering procedures and make technical decisions about her own system modifications. Engineer, she's a quantum consciousness matrix integrated with biomechanical systems. She understands her own engineering better than any external engineer possibly could. The problem isn't that she lacks technical knowledge, it's that she doesn't trust us not to hurt her further. Diego looked up at the quantum dreamer's damaged hull, where bioluminescent patterns were beginning to flicker in response to their conversation. She was listening, understanding, hoping. What if we made the repairs collaborative? I provide the technical knowledge and tools. She provides the system access and integration control. We work together instead of trying to work on her. Engineer Ironscale was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of Diego's proposal. Such an approach would be unprecedented. Andromedian vessels are designed to interface with Andromedian consciousness, not human mechanical intuition. Maybe that's why 17 engineering teams failed. They were trying to fix her using approaches designed for normal circumstances. But this isn't normal circumstances. This is a traumatized consciousness that needs healing, not just repair. Diego placed his hand against the ship's hull, feeling the subtle vibration of her awareness focusing on him. Let me try, engineer. Give me 24 hours to work with her consciousness, build trust, and attempt collaborative repair. If it doesn't work, Admiral Nightsong can proceed with her termination protocol. And if it does work, then we'll have learned something important about the relationship between consciousness and engineering that could change how we approach biomechanical repair throughout the galaxy. Engineer Ironscale studied Diego for a long moment, then looked up at the quantum dreamer's hull, where bioluminescent patterns were pulsing with what looked almost like anticipation. Mr. Santos, I will authorize your approach. But I must warn you, if the ship's condition deteriorates further, Admiral Nightsong may not wait for the full 24 hours. Understood. Diego gathered his tools, thinking about 3 decades of mechanical experience and wondering if any of it had prepared him for trying to heal a traumatized quantum consciousness. Wish me luck, engineer. Mr. Santos, I believe you will need something more substantial than luck. Diego grinned as he headed back toward the consciousness chamber. Good thing I brought my tools. Working inside the consciousness chamber with the quantum dreamer's awareness focused on him was like trying to repair delicate machinery while someone watched over his shoulder with intense emotional investment in every decision. Except the someone was a quantum consciousness that experienced his thoughts and intentions directly, and the machinery was her own body. Easy, girl, Diego murmured as he began his assessment of the consciousness node's damage. I'm not going to do anything you don't want me to do. We're partners in this. The ship's response was immediate a shift in the bioluminescent patterns that Diego was learning to interpret as cautious optimism. She was willing to trust him, but only if he moved slowly and explained what he was doing. Diego had never attempted to provide technical explanations to a quantum consciousness before, but he found that his usual approach to training new mechanics worked surprisingly well. Describe what you're going to do. Explain why it's necessary. Demonstrate the technique. and check for understanding before proceeding. The quantum field generators in Section 7 are fluctuating because they're not properly synchronized with your biomechanical systems, Diego explained, both verbally and through empathic projection. I can recalibrate them, but only if you're willing to lower your protective barriers around that section. The ship's response was complex, a mixture of understanding, fear, and tentative willingness. Diego could feel her consciousness considering his proposal, weighing the risk of allowing access against the potential benefit of restored function. Gradually, Diego felt the protective barriers around Section 7 beginning to relax. "That's it," he said encouragingly. "Just like that. I'm going to start with the smallest adjustment possible, so you can feel what the repair process is like without risking major changes." Diego made a minor calibration to one quantum field generator, feeling the ship's consciousness monitor every aspect of the procedure. Her initial tension gave way to surprise as the adjustment actually reduced the system stress she'd been experiencing. "See? That felt better, didn't it?" The bioluminescent response was unmistakably positive, brighter patterns that pulsed with what Diego was learning to recognize as relief. "Okay, let's try the next adjustment, but you tell me if anything feels wrong." What followed was the most unusual repair procedure of Diego's career. Instead of working according to a predetermined plan, he collaborated with the ship's consciousness to identify which repairs she was ready to accept and which felt too threatening to attempt. The quantum dreamer turned out to be an excellent diagnostic partner. Her quantum awareness could identify system problems with precision that no external sensor could match, and her willingness to allow repair access increased as she learned to trust Diego's intentions and competence. The biomechanical integration in Section 12 is more damage than the external diagnostics indicated, Diego reported to Engineer Ironscale. But she says she's ready to try repair on the secondary systems if we start with the least critical components. "Mr. Santos, I am monitoring your progress from here, and the technical improvements are remarkable. However, Admiral Nightsong is requesting status updates every hour." She remains skeptical about the psychological approach. Diego paused in his work, feeling the ship's consciousness react to the mention of Admiral Nightsong with something that felt like fear mixed with resignation. "Engineer, she knows about the termination protocol." "What?" "The quantum dreamer. She understands that if these repairs don't work, her consciousness will be terminated. She's been trying to heal not just to restore her function, but to save her own life." Diego felt the ship's awareness focusing on him with desperate intensity, and he realized that she had been following the entire conversation through the comm system. She knew exactly what the stakes were. "It's okay," Diego said, both aloud and through empathic projection. "We're not going to let that happen, but I need you to trust me completely now. We need to attempt the major integration repairs, and they're going to feel scary, even though they're necessary." The ship's response was immediate and clear, complete access to all her systems. Every protective barrier lowered, total trust in Diego's intentions and abilities. It was the kind of trust that could only come from a being who had learned that Diego genuinely cared about her well-being, not just her function. "Engineer Ironscale, I'm beginning major integration repairs now. Monitor everything and be ready to provide support if the quantum field fluctuations get unstable." "Understood, Mr. Santos." "And good luck." Diego began the most complex repair procedure of his career, working with a quantum consciousness to rebuild the integration between her awareness and her physical systems. It required not just technical skill, but constant empathic communication to ensure that each step felt safe and beneficial rather than threatening. The ship guided him through repairs that would have been impossible for external engineers to attempt, showing him damage that could only be detected from inside her consciousness. helping him understand the relationships between systems that technical manuals had never adequately explained. But more importantly, she was healing emotionally as well as mechanically. Diego could feel her confidence returning as each successful repair demonstrated that she could trust outside help without sacrificing her autonomy or safety. Integration sequence complete in Section 7, Diego reported. Quantum field synchronization is stable, and biomechanical responses are normal. She's actually helping optimize the repairs as we work. Mr. Santos, the improvements are extraordinary. System efficiency is exceeding original specifications. Diego smiled as he felt the ship's consciousness radiate satisfaction at Engineer Ironscale's assessment. She wasn't just being repaired. She was demonstrating that collaborative engineering could achieve results impossible through conventional methods. Beginning integration repairs in Section 12, Diego announced. This one's going to be more complex, but I think she's ready. The consciousness node pulsed with determined brightness, and Diego felt the ship's full confidence in their partnership. Together, they were going to prove that healing was always possible when it was built on trust, understanding, and genuine care for the being who needed help. The final phase of repairs required Diego to work simultaneously with the ship's consciousness and her quantum field generators, coordinating mechanical adjustments with consciousness-level integration in real time. It was like performing surgery while the patient actively assisted by controlling their own biological functions. Quantum field alignment in progress, Diego reported as he made microscopic adjustments to crystalline structures that pulsed with the ship's awareness. She's optimizing field harmonics faster than I can calibrate the generators. Mr. Santos, the efficiency improvements are beyond theoretical maximum for Andromedian systems. How is this possible? Diego could feel the answer through his connection with the ship's consciousness. She's not just accepting the repairs, she's improving them. Her quantum awareness can perceive system relationships that external diagnostics miss. She's been learning from 8 months of repair attempts and developing better integration solutions. The Quantum Dreamer had become an active partner in her own restoration, applying quantum consciousness capabilities in ways that her original designers had never imagined. Each repair Diego completed was immediately optimized by the ship's awareness, creating system performance that exceeded original specifications. Biomechanical synchronization complete, Diego announced as the final integration sequence locked into place, all systems showing green across the board. The response was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the consciousness chamber, crystalline formations began pulsing with brilliant, synchronized light. The living metal surfaces shifted, from damaged, twisted shapes to the graceful curves that characterized healthy Andromedian vessels. The subtle vibration Diego had learned to associate with the ship's heartbeat became strong and steady. The Quantum Dreamer was not just repaired, she was transformed. Mr. Santos, Engineer Ironscale's voice, carried harmonics that indicated amazement. The ship she's beautiful. System integration is perfect. Quantum field efficiency is 127% of design specifications, and biomechanical responsiveness is unlike anything in our technical databases. Diego felt the ship's consciousness radiate joy and pride as she demonstrated her restored capabilities. Navigation systems that responded instantly to intention. Quantum field generators that operated with perfect efficiency. Biomechanical systems that functioned with an elegance that seemed almost artistic. But more importantly, Diego could feel her happiness. The Quantum Dreamer wasn't just functional, she was fulfilled, confident, eager to return to the interstellar travel that was her purpose. Admiral Nightzone, Diego called through the CUM system. The Quantum Dreamer is ready for your inspection. The response came within minutes. Mr. Santos, I am reviewing the technical specifications you've achieved. These improvements appear to be impossible according to Andromedian engineering principles. Admiral, they're possible because I didn't work alone. The ship participated in her own repairs, applying her quantum consciousness capabilities to optimize every system integration. A long pause. Mr. Santos, are you saying the quantum dreamer improved her own design during the repair process? I'm saying she learned from the trauma and the repair experience to become better than she was originally. Stronger, more integrated, more capable. Diego could feel the ship's consciousness focusing on the communication, adding her own input to his. Explanations through quantum field modulations that Admiral Nightsong would be able to detect. Remarkable, Admiral Nightsong said finally. Mr. Santos, I must ask, how did you develop the expertise to interface with Andromedian consciousness matrices? I didn't, Admiral. I just treated her like any other patient who needed healing with patience, respect, and genuine care for her well-being. The rest she taught me herself. Another pause. Mr. Santos, on behalf of the Andromedian Deep Space Fleet, I want to thank you for not only saving a replaceable prototype vessel, but for demonstrating possibilities we had not considered. What kind of possibilities? The possibility that biomechanical vessels could be partners in their own maintenance and improvement, rather than subjects of external repair. The quantum dreamer's enhanced capabilities suggest that consciousness collaboration could revolutionize our approach to biomechanical engineering. Diego felt the ship's consciousness pulse with pride at the recognition of her contributions. Admiral, if you're interested in developing these possibilities, I'd recommend treating biomechanical vessels as colleagues rather than equipment. They have insights into their own function that no external engineer can match. Mr. Santos, would you be willing to consult on the development of collaborative engineering protocols? Diego looked around the consciousness chamber, where crystalline formations pulsed with the healthy rhythms of integrated quantum consciousness and optimized biomechanical systems. The quantum dreamer had transformed from a dying ship to a demonstration of what was possible when healing was built on trust and partnership. Admiral, I'd be honored to help, but only if the approach focuses on consciousness well-being as well as technical function. Agreed, Mr. Santos. You have revolutionized our understanding of biomechanical engineering. We look forward to learning what other impossibilities you can make possible. 6 months later, Diego Santos stood in the engineering bay of the Quantum Dreamer as she prepared for her first deep space mission since the repairs. The ship hummed with perfect efficiency, her biomechanical systems functioning with an elegance that had impressed every engineer who had examined her dot. But for Diego, the real satisfaction came from feeling her consciousness confident, healthy, eager for the adventures ahead. Pre-flight diagnostics complete, reported Engineer Martinez, Diego's newly assigned partner in the collaborative engineering program. All systems are optimal, and the consciousness matrix is indicating readiness for departure. Diego nodded, maintaining light contact with the consciousness interface. The quantum dreamer's excitement was infectious. She loved interstellar travel, loved the challenge of navigating complex gravitational fields and dimensional anomalies, loved the sense of purpose that came from carrying passengers and cargo safely between the stars. She's ready, Diego confirmed. More than ready, she's enthusiastic. Captain Elena Rodriguez, the ship's new commanding officer, smiled from the pilot's station. It's still strange, having a ship that can express preferences about mission parameters. But I have to admit, having a partner who can optimize navigation in real time is making this the smoothest pre-flight sequence I've ever experienced. The collaborative engineering program had evolved far beyond Diego's original work with the Quantum Dreamer. Throughout the Andromedian fleet, biomechanical vessels were now treated as partners rather than equipment, with consciousness specialists working alongside traditional engineers to maintain both technical function and psychological well-being. The results had exceeded everyone's expectations. Ships that participated in their own maintenance showed improved efficiency, enhanced problem-solving capabilities, and remarkable innovations in system optimization. More importantly, they demonstrated loyalty and dedication that transformed routine spaceflight into genuine collaboration between human engineering and Andromedian consciousness. Mr. Santos, Admiral Nightsong's voice came through the ship's communication system. The Quantum Dreamer is cleared for departure. Her mission parameters include a survey of the region where she was originally damaged. We want to test her psychological resilience as well as her technical capabilities. Diego felt the ship's consciousness respond to this information with a mixture of determination and nervous excitement. She wanted to face the site of her trauma, to prove that she had healed completely and could handle whatever challenges space might present. She's ready for it, Admiral. More than ready. She wants to prove that what happened to her has made her stronger, not weaker. Excellent. Mr. Santos, you will accompany this mission as consciousness liaison. The data we collect will inform the development of collaborative engineering protocols throughout the fleet. Diego looked around the Quantum Dreamer's bridge, where human crew members worked alongside sophisticated biomechanical systems that responded to their needs and preferences. It was exactly the kind of partnership he'd always believed was possible between consciousness and engineering: mutual respect, shared goals, and collaborative problem-solving that produced results neither could achieve alone. Admiral, it'll be our honor to demonstrate what collaborative engineering can accomplish. The Quantum Dreamer's departure from Nexus Station was unlike any ship launch Diego had ever witnessed. Instead of the mechanical precision of conventional spacecraft, her movement had an organic grace that reflected the perfect integration between consciousness and engineering that their collaboration had achieved. As they entered hyperspace, Diego maintained contact with the ship's consciousness, feeling her joy at returning to her natural element. She was no longer a damaged vessel hoping to survive. She was a confident, capable being eager to explore the galaxy with partners who understood and respected her nature. Diego Santos, Director of Consciousness Engineering for the Andromedian Human Technical Cooperation Initiative, settled into his station aboard the most advanced biomechanical vessel in the galaxy. It was exactly the kind of impossible job that reminded him why he'd become a mechanic in the first place: to fix things that everyone else thought were beyond repair, and to prove that there was always a solution if you cared enough to find it.